Namaskar. Today, we revisit a chapter that changed India forever, the 1962 war with China. Once, the slogan, hindi-chini Bhai-Bhai, symbolized friendship between two ancient civilizations. But that friendship ended in betrayal, leaving a wound that still aches. The 1962 war wasn't just a military defeat, it shattered India's idealism and forced a harsh reckoning. Why did a trusted friend become an enemy overnight? How did peace talks turn into a full-scale invasion? This is a story of misplaced trust, political missteps, and the extraordinary bravery of Indian soldiers. We'll explore the roots of the conflict, the key battles in the Himalayas, and the war's impact on India's politics and military. It was a national trauma, but also a moment of awakening. Let's break down what really happened in those cold mountains in 1962. This isn't just history. It's a lesson in resilience and transformation. Join me as we uncover the story of the 1962 India-China War, a tale of betrayal, sacrifice, and resurgence. Let's begin. The root cause was a poorly defined 3,225-kilometer border. After China's 1949 revolution and its annexation of Tibet, India lost its buffer zone. The border dispute centered on Aksai Chin in the west and the Northeast Frontier Agency, now Arunachal Pradesh, in the east. India recognized the McMahon Line in the east, but China rejected it, claiming Tibet had no right to sign the agreement. In the west, Aksai Chin was claimed by both sides, but the British left conflicting maps. China quietly built a road through Aksai Chin, shocking India in 1957. Protests failed. Tensions rose. In 1959, the Dalai Lama fled to India, angering China further. The border dispute became a matter of national pride and security. Talks between Nehru and Zhou Enlai failed. China offered a swap, recognized the McMahon Line for Aksai Chin, but India refused. Nehru's forward policy sent Indian troops to disputed areas, escalating tensions. Small posts were set up to assert India's claim, but this risky move set the stage for war. The situation became a standoff, with both sides unwilling to back down. The seeds of conflict were sown, and war became inevitable. The border, once peaceful, was now a flashpoint. The countdown to war had begun. India's forward policy placed small, isolated posts deep in disputed territory. The leadership believed China wouldn't risk war, an error in judgment. China saw these moves as provocation and began building up forces. Tensions peaked in October 1962, especially at the Tagla Ridge in Neifa. A clash at Dola Post became the flashpoint. On October 12th, Nehru publicly ordered the army to throw the Chinese out, which Beijing saw as a declaration of war. On October 20th, without warning, China launched a massive attack in both the east and west. Indian posts, unprepared and outnumbered, were quickly overrun. Artillery and gunfire shattered the Himalayan silence. The 1962 India-China War had begun. The dream of hindi-chini Bhai-Bhai was over. India was thrust into a brutal conflict it was not ready for. The nation faced its harshest test. The battle for survival had started. The main Chinese offensive struck Neifa with overwhelming force. Indian soldiers, outnumbered and ill-equipped, faced impossible odds at Namkha Chu. Despite their courage, the brigade was wiped out. Tawang fell, shocking the nation and exposing India's vulnerabilities. After a brief lull, China launched a second, even more powerful attack in mid-November. Indian troops fought heroically at Walong, but were forced to withdraw. The worst defeat came at Sela and Bomdila, where Chinese troops bypassed defenses and cut off Indian positions. Panic and chaos followed. The withdrawal turned into a rout. The Chinese advanced rapidly, reaching the Assam foothills. Tezpur was evacuated in fear. The Indian defense had collapsed. The psychological impact was devastating. The nation was in shock. In Ladakh, the battle was just as fierce. China aimed to secure Aksai Chin and eliminate Indian posts. Indian soldiers, isolated at extreme altitudes, faced relentless attacks. Communication was lost, but resistance was fierce. The Battle of Rezang La became legendary. 120 soldiers led by Major Shaitan Singh held out against overwhelming odds. 114 died, but they stalled the Chinese advance. By war's end, China controlled Aksai Chin and had removed most Indian posts. Indian losses were heavy, but their courage was unmatched. Stories from Galwan Valley and Rezang La became symbols of sacrifice. Soldiers endured freezing cold, lack of supplies, and thin air. Their bravery in Ladakh is an enduring part of the 1962 story. The cost was immense, but their spirit was unbroken. The struggle in the West matched the tragedy in the East. The nation would never forget their sacrifice. The 1962 war exposed a stark contrast between the two armies. China was fully prepared, well-trained, well-equipped, and strategically brilliant. Their tactics, speed, surprise, infiltration, caught India off guard. They built roads and supply depots near the border, ensuring logistical superiority. India, meanwhile, relied on flawed assumptions and political gambles. The forward policy pushed troops into indefensible positions without support. The army lacked resources, training, and coordination. Critical errors included not using the Indian Air Force offensively, fearing Chinese retaliation. This denied ground troops vital support. Leadership failures and poor communication compounded the crisis. The result was a devastating defeat. The war was a harsh lesson in the cost of unpreparedness. India's military shortcomings were laid bare. On November 21, 1962, China declared a unilateral ceasefire. In the east, they withdrew. In the west, they held Aksai Chin. For India, the war's end brought humiliation and grief. Thousands of soldiers were lost, and territory was gone forever. The defeat shattered Nehru's image and exposed flaws in his policies. National morale hit rock bottom. Defense Minister Krishna Menon resigned. Political turmoil followed. India's non-aligned status was weakened, and it sought military aid from the West. The war was a wake-up call for the military. The government increased defense spending and launched a massive modernization drive. New mountain divisions were raised and military training improved. The focus shifted from diplomacy alone to credible military strength. The trauma of 1962 became the catalyst for a stronger, more professional armed force. India vowed never to be caught unprepared again. The nation began to rebuild with renewed resolve. The 1962 war taught India hard but vital lessons. International relations are driven by interests, not friendships. India realized it must defend its borders on its own. Military preparedness became a top priority. Defense budgets rose, and indigenous production was emphasized. Intelligence agencies were revamped for better threat assessment. Political and military leaders learned the need for better coordination. Clear objectives and honest assessments became central to strategy. The war also united the nation in adversity. Patriotism surged, and people rallied behind the armed forces. Border infrastructure improved, aiding both defense and development. India emerged more cautious, realistic, and resilient. The scars of 1962 shaped a stronger nation. The 1962 war was a turning point in India's history. It began with a border dispute and ended in a painful defeat. Indian soldiers' courage at Namkachu and Rezang La remains legendary. The loss shattered India's prestige but forced a necessary transformation. The defeat led to military modernization and a more pragmatic foreign policy. Even today, the border dispute with China remains unresolved. The line of actual control is still a flashpoint, but India is now stronger, economically, militarily, and politically. The memory of 1962 is a reminder to stay vigilant. This is not just a story of defeat, but of resilience and renewal. For the young, it's a lesson in sacrifice and the realities of geopolitics. The wound may have healed, but the scar reminds us to always be prepared. Jai Hind.